All right, so Donald Trump did a sit-down interview with Candace Owens, of all people, where they were talking about a bunch of different shit. They talked about the COVID vaccines, they talked about Donald Trump's presidency, they talked about the election, and interestingly enough, they also talked about Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. So I wanted to play you guys this clip because, even though I absolutely despise Candace Owens and pretty much everything that she stands for, she did ask a pretty good question here, which is basically, Donald Trump, you had the power, you had the authority, especially as a guy who was running this, anti-deep state election campaign strategy. You had the power to pardon both of them. So why the fuck did you not do that? So I wanted to play you this because I thought his answer was pretty hilarious, I guess you could say, or, completely lacking substance in any way. And he very visibly gets extremely uncomfortable in this situation.
I want to ask you, in terms of talking about this corruption, by the way, name that comes to mind in the news recently is Julian Assange. He was exposing this corruption early on. He's had his life ruined because of it. It's a really sad story. Edward Snowden, think about that bravery. For me, I was quite young when that was going on. But the idea of saying, hey, whistleblowing, actually, we've got some corruption going on. They're not being honest with the American people. You could have had a chance to pardon these individuals. Why decide not to in that moment?
You have two sides of it. In one case, you have sort of a spy deal going on, and in another case, you have somebody that's exposing real corruption.
Right.
I feel a little bit, I won't say which one, but I feel a little bit more strongly about one than the other.
Right.
And you probably understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But I could have done it, but I will say you have people on both sides of that issue, good people on both sides, and you have some bad people on one side. But I decided to let that one ride, let the courts work it out.
I want to ask you, in terms of talking about this corruption, by the
Okay, so yeah, that was pretty much it. He literally did not even touch on the substance of either Julian Assange or Edward Snowden. And listen, I don't know if that's because, he's kind of, slow up here and he kind of forgets exactly what the details were of each of these cases, so he was just kind of riffing. But, he didn't really say anything of substance there. He was taptoeing around it. And, I get that politicians do that a lot, Donald Trump especially, but goddamn, that was a completely unsubstantive answer that he just gave there. But, he said, let's let the court handle both of these cases. Okay, well, first of all, they're entirely trumped up court proceedings that are happening. We just had Julian Assange. He officially is going to be able to be extradited to the United States. They're not going to give him a fair trial. In fact, he is not even legally allowed in the trial that they are going to give him here in the U.S. He is not even legally allowed to make the argument that what he did in releasing documents of U.S. war crimes in Afghanistan and Iraq, he's not even allowed to make the argument that that was in the public's interest, that that was an act of public good to adequately inform the American people in an actual, democracy, or what is supposedly a democracy. We have a right to deserve that information, and he's not even allowed to make that argument in court, and neither would Edward Snowden, which is exactly why he is exiled from the United States and can't come back right now, is he can't come back and say, I am exposing the fact that the U.S. government is violating your constitutional rights against unreasonable search and seizure, which is exactly what he exposed, the widespread NSA surveillance of American citizens without any warrants, without any due cause. And so that's what he revealed, and he can't even come back and make the argument of, I am exposing the fact that the U.S. government is, breaking the rules of the Constitution. I can't even come back and say that was in the interest of the American people to know that. So if they're not even allowed to make those arguments, then appealing to, the court proceedings is just complete bullshit. It is both of these are political trials. They are the U.S. empire getting pissed that their crimes and their violations of the Constitution were exposed to the American public, and they're trying to take it out on both Julian Assange and Edward Snowden for different but somewhat connected things, basically. So again, this is a guy who ran an entire campaign, 2 campaigns, on being the drain the swamp guy, being like, I'm going to be the guy who is challenging the elites, I'm going to be the guy who's challenging the establishment, and he was completely cucked to the deep state. He was completely cucked to the establishment throughout the entirety of his presidency. So it's just a complete joke. Anybody who thought he was actually going to go in there and drain the swamp, this is a guy who filled his cabinet with people like Betsy DeVos, complete corporate ghouls like a Goldman Sachs lackey in Steve Mnuchin to run the Treasury. This guy is not, and Mike Pompeo, who we're about to talk about, to lead the CIA. This is not a guy who was draining the swamp by any stretch of the imagination. So just to remind you guys exactly the extent to which Donald Trump and his campaign and the people who we have within his administration were not actually just sticking to the court proceedings, okay? They were actually literally planning on kidnapping and assassinating Julian Assange specifically. So let's just go ahead and read read some of these absolutely psychotic details of Mike Pompeo's plans for Julian Assange under the Trump administration. So here from Yahoo News: kidnapping, assassination, and a London shootout inside the CIA's secret war plans against WikiLeaks. So they say in 2017, as Julian Assange began his 5th year holdup in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, the CIA plotted to kidnap the WikiLeaks founder, spurring heated debate amongst Trump administration officials over the legality and practicality of such an operation. Just brazenly illegal. You would be literally kidnapping or potentially assassinating a journalist for exposing your crime. Specifically, they're going to get to the release of the Vault 7 CIA documents, which WikiLeaks helped to publish, but they continue here saying that some senior officials inside the CIA and the Trump administration even discussed killing Assange, going so far as to request sketches or options for how to assassinate him, and discussions over kidnapping or killing Assange occurred at the highest levels of the Trump administration, said a former senior intelligence official. There seemed to be no boundaries, including no legal boundaries, as Donald Trump was just pretending that there were in the Julian Assange case. But they continue saying that the conversations were part of an unprecedented CIA campaign directed against WikiLeaks and its founder, and the agency's multi-pronged plans also included extensive spying on WikiLeaks associates, sowing discord amongst the group's members, and stealing their electronic devices. And they say that while Assange had been on the radar of U.S. intelligence agencies for years, these plans for an all-out war against him were sparked by WikiLeaks' ongoing publication of extraordinarily sensitive CIA hacking tools known collectively as Vault 7, like I was just saying, which the agency ultimately concluded represented the largest data loss in CIA history. So listen, they continue down here with some quotes from Mike Pompeo saying that they were completely detached from reality because they were so embarrassed about the leak of the Vault 7 documents, and that they were seeing blood. So listen, I mean, in the broader picture, Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, they both obviously, if you care about the Constitution, if you care about, Americans not having the U.S. government do widespread surveillance on them, violating their Fourth Amendment constitutional rights, or if you care about the U.S. public having the ability to know about brazen war crimes, the blatant killing of innocent men, women, and children in war, if you think that the United States public deserves to have access to that information so that we can hold the powerful accountable within our government, then you should support the release of both Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. So yes, obviously, Donald Trump, if you were going to go out there and pretend like you were the anti-elitist, you were the anti-establishment, or the guy who was going to take on the deep state, then you should have just pardoned all of them on day one. But he obviously didn't do that. Why? Because he was cucked to motherfuckers like Mike Pompeo, who were literally planning on killing or assassinating Julian Assange. So, it just gives you a perspective in terms of who Trump is, and the fact that his body language in that situation, he was clearly, so uncomfortable. He was crossing his arms like this and kind of leaning back in his chair, and he had absolutely nothing of substance to say because he knows that this is a perfect example about how he is not actually the guy who is going to drain the swamp. In fact, he was one of the swampiest presidents that we have had throughout the entirety of U.S. history.